Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to discuss self-managed super funds that are in or about to be in pension phase. Specifically, we're going to look at how to maximise the benefits of an existing share portfolio that's held in a self-managed super fund in pension phase. If you don't already have an existing portfolio, they're easily established and these same concepts will apply. We're going to use 3 everyday concepts to illustrate how to maximise these benefits and take a 7% cash dividend to a 12% fully franked income for the year, 17% income for the year, and a 23% income for the year. Respectively, for these aligning with those, these returns are for the most part independent of the capital variations, so the share price movements throughout the year. This is the income that's separate from the capital movement of the shares. We're going to discuss these over the next 5 minutes or so. The first concept we'll call the coffee card concept. Just like a loyalty card when you buy a cup of coffee, each coffee you buy, you get a stamp, 10 stamps on your card, gets a free coffee. When you're lining up for your coffee and the person in front of you doesn't want the stamp, why not get their stamp on your card? You may pay them 10 cents for that stamp, but we're looking at the concept of buying something from another person. It's worthless to them, but has value to us. So the concept of buying something from another person, it's worthless to them, like the stamp, but has value to us. So we'll call that the coffee card concept. The second concept we'll call the off-season concept. Just like a professional athlete performs and practices both on-season and off-season, it's a performance that they do in both these periods, or the practice for both these periods, that leads to their overall performance for the year. So we're going to focus on what we do in the off-season for shares. And finally, the investment loan. Most people are familiar with investment loans for buying investment properties. You may put in $100,000 yourself, borrow $400,000 from a bank, buy a $500,000 property. In 2 years' time, it could be worth $600,000. Sell that property, pay back the loan, cover all the costs, and what's left is a profit. So we'll call that the investment loan. Now, just quickly, for a self-managed super fund that has shares, most people, when they're looking for an income from the shares, will straight away seek blue chip shares, a high dividend yield, and a fully franked yield at that. We don't have to look too far on the ASX. We're looking at the big 4 banks, ANZ, Commonwealth Bank, Westpac and NAB. We'll probably look at Telstra, the 2 grocers, Woolworths and Wesfarmers, and then maybe BHP and Rio Tinto. Now if we use Westpac, NAB or Telstra, examples at the moment, they're currently paying about a 7% cash dividend. So that's the amount of cash received from the shares throughout the year. When they file the tax return at the end of the financial year, the franking credits come back and that becomes 10% for the year. So that's a fully franked return. Now just as each individual investor has their own goals and targets, the franking credits will have different impacts for each investor. So if we look at how the franking credits impact investors, at one end of the scale, with maximum benefit, we'll have the self-managed super fund in pension phase. And at the other end of the scale, maybe someone like an overseas investor with little to no right or benefit from franking credits for whatever their reasons are. Just like the coffee card, why not buy the franking credits from the overseas investor and put them in the self-managed super fund with pension phase? When we apply this to shares, we achieve a 12% return. So it's based on the 7% cash dividend, franking credits come in, we buy extra franking credits, and net of all costs, looking at 12% per annum. That's just the income. The second concept is the off-season concept. for shares, or blue chip shares, most of them will pay 2 dividends throughout the year. So if we look at a financial year, looking July through to June, there may be 2 dividends. The shares need to be held on those dates to be entitled to the dividend, and if you want the franking credits, we need to hold them for a bit longer. But there's still an off-season for the shares. So if we look at, say, ANZ, we're using NAB and Westpac, we'll use either one of those. Say Westpac may vary throughout the year like this. Commonwealth Bank may vary quite similarly throughout the year. Throughout that year, there will be slight deviations in how the share prices move. However, we can receive the dividend for Westpac throughout the year, holding on those 2 dates. We can also look to hold another share throughout that year that has similar movements in the share price. We get twice as many dividends. So in the same financial year, we're looking at getting 2 lots of dividends on the same amount of capital. Limited variation in that capital. Net of costs, the income is about 17% per annum. The third and final concept is putting the first two together. As they stand, that will require about 400 days in the year. And as we cannot create time, we can get an investment loan on the time that we do need. To borrow money in a self-managed super fund to buy shares is done on the ASX through an instrument called a warrant. The warrants are created to meet all the requirements imposed on the self-managed super fund. From the ATO, the SIS Act, all the requirements are met through the warrant. So it ticks all those boxes, and it allows us to combine these 2 concepts and the income created from these 2 concepts using an investment loan or a warrant becomes 23%. That's throughout the year. That's just the income. So if you're comfortable with an investment loan, so borrowing money, the risks involved with it, just like an investment property, and comfortable with a warrant, then that can be 23% per annum on the shares or the existing portfolio held in the self-managed super fund. If it's just working with shares and going from one to another in the off-season, 17%. And if it's just sticking with the same shares but buying more franking credits, looking at 12%. These are net of costs. Looking forward to discussing these in more detail if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.